Welcome back to Study Through the Bible, where we study the Bible in community here on YouTube. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and click on that subscribe button so you don't miss any future content. And we are going to be in Numbers 26 and 27 today, as well as chapter 30 and Jeremiah 22. So, welcome. This is a place where we study the Bible in community, and we do that through daily studies, which you can find in the description down below, and we pray that you would join us for that. And then we have these weekly videos where I share my insights and my comments into the text. And then if you have questions or insights that I didn't cover, go ahead and put those in the comments down below. Let's start a discussion over those things, and then some of those I'll choose for weekly Q&A videos. And so let's go ahead and jump in. This is week 5 in the book of Numbers. We're getting closer to the end. And we read in Numbers 26:4, "Take the sum of the people from 20 years old and upward, as the Lord commanded Moses and the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Egypt." You may remember at the very beginning of the book that they took a similar census when they came out of Egypt and they're in the wilderness, they're headed towards the promised land, that God says, "I want you to count all of the people, men 20 and older, who are able to go to war." Okay, so he's taking account of all of the people who are going to be able to fight when they go into the promised land, just so they know what they're dealing with. Now, they've gone to the promised land. They made the decision to not go in. God says you're not going to go in because you didn't have enough faith. You're going to wander around in the wilderness for 40 years until this entire generation dies off. And then your kids are going to go in after that. So now he says, I want you to take another count. And Numbers 26:64 clarifies, "But among these there was not a man of them whom Moses and Aaron the priests numbered when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai." And so they are not counting anybody that was previously counted. Okay, that entire generation died off, which means that everybody that's being counted now is 20 years or older, male, and isn't one of them. And so now that it's been 40 years, so I guess the cap would be 60, right? Because that would be the minimum age of one of those who died in the previous generation. Now think about this. All of those who were 19 and younger, and they weren't counted in the previous census, now they were counted, but the maximum age of that group is 59. And the minimum age of that group would be like 41, okay? And so you have the 41 through 59-year-olds who were actually there when they actually did the first census. And then you have everyone that's 20 to 40 years old that are a brand new generation behind them. They are their kids. And this really struck me because it made me realize that after the events at Kadesh Barnea, when the spies came back and they gave their bad report, and only Joshua and Caleb gave the good report, that after God gave the consequence, saying, you don't want to go in, you don't think you can beat them, then you're not going to go in. You're going to wander around, you're going to die, this generation is going to die off. That generation, everyone in that generation had a decision to make at that point. And that decision is this. There's two main ones. One, am I going to live the rest of my life for Yahweh? And the second one is, am I going to set my children up for success? And so I wanted to address those briefly. The first one is this. Am I going to live the rest of my life for Yahweh? Oftentimes, it's those moments where things don't go the way that we intended them to go that we have the greatest decision to make. Are we going to let that define us and say, if I can't have that, I'm done, and I'm going to kind of just check out here? Some people do that and even go in so far as to blame God. How could you do this to me? If you were loving, this wouldn't have happened, and all of those types of things that people say. And then others say, that may be the case. That didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. And there may be real consequences for my actions or the actions of others that were done unto me. But God is still faithful, and he's still on the throne, and he still has a plan for my life, and he still can use me in a powerful way. And that's the choice that the Israelites in that generation had to make. Were they going to check out and say, if I can't have the promised land, then I'm done. I don't even care anymore. I might as well just die. Or are they going to say, there's still yet something for me to do? And this leads us into the second question. Am I going to set my children up for success? God made it clear this generation is going to die off, but your children are going to go into the promised land. And it seems like a lot of them made the decision that if I'm not going to go in, I'm going to focus my attention on my children. I'm going to focus my attention on having children. I'm going to focus my attention on investing in those children and setting them up for success. And the reason I know that is because the difference in number between the first census and the second census was only a difference of 1,820 men. And that means that nobody, and we already said no, and I forgot to mention the reason why they weren't counted, the ones who were previously counted in the last census, is because they were all dead. That's the reason why they're taking the census. The time had come for the new generation to go into the promised land under the leadership of Joshua after Moses and Aaron die on this side of the promised land. And so there's only a difference of 1,820 men. And there's a very small age gap, really, of people that they were counting. And so that tells me that the Israelites, even though they weren't going to go into the wilderness, they were focused on their children. They were focused on having children. They were focused on setting their children up for success. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, but that is sometimes a decision that you have to make as parents. Sometimes there's lofty goals that you have set for your life, and you realize at some point, I'm not personally maybe ever going to get there, but my kids can. And that's exactly where these people were at. And these are questions that most of us have to face in our lives as well. So 26:53, unto these the land shall be divided for an inheritance according to the number of names. And then 55, notwithstanding the land shall be divided by lots according to the names of the tribes of their fathers, they shall inherit. And so God is concerned with fairness. And so here's the fairness. It's not those who have the most money who get the best land or get the most land. That's kind of the way that we've operated. And it's like the families, the prominent families that have passed on from generation to generation their money, and they came from maybe wealth in another country, and they come here and they establish that. That's kind of how our society functions. God says, when you guys go into the promised land, here's how it's going to work. Yes, there are some families and some tribes that have more people at this point. But we're going to divide the land up by the amount of people. So yes, the families that have more people are going to have more land. And so you would think that they're going to be more prominent, they're going to have more influence. But per person, it's the same for everybody. Everybody gets the same amount of space. And how do they determine who gets what space? God says that you are going to do it fair. It's the equivalent of rock, paper, scissors, or throwing the dice, or any other kind of random way of making a decision of who's going to get what. God says, when you go into the land, It's going to be fair. It's going to be right. It's going to be equal. And we're going to do this the right way. And so this is really symbolic to me of how God intends to have a place and a plan for everybody. Every single creature, every single human he created, he has a plan for. And sometimes those plans are realized, sometimes they're not realized. And in all of our lives, the ultimate ideal plan that God wants to give to every one of us, none of us have that fully realized. And we call that, I've coined the term stunted grace, because kind of like stunted growth, there's certain things you can do to stunt your growth. There's certain things that we all do to stunt the grace, the gifts that God wants to give us in our lives. But God has an intention and he has a plan for everybody. It says that every one of us has good works prepared beforehand by God for us to do. Every single one of us has gifts. Every single one of us has talents. Every one of us has all of these things, like your knowledge, your gifts, your abilities, your time, your money, your experience, your personality. Every single one of those things is intentional by God, and he created us with diversity in mind. He created us for each of us to have our gifts, that we come together and we serve one another, and there's a place there's a place for everybody. There's a role for everybody. There is something for everybody to do. There's always somebody that needs to be reached. And your relationships you have with them are different than my relationships. And we are able together, corporately, to reach all of the people if we just focus on what God has given to us. And so it really struck me how God was concerned with fairness and equality and rightness when they went into the land. Numbers 26:11, notwithstanding the children of Korah died not. Okay, so this stuck out to me as it's going through all the names of all the children and all the tribes and everything, that it goes out of its way of saying, it brings up a lot of moments from the past, Nadab and Abihu and the strange fire and how they were the sons of Aaron, but they died. And it brought up Korah and his rebellion, and Nadab and Abihu and their rebellion, and how the earth swallowed them up, and everything that happened there. But yet it goes on to say the children of Korah didn't die. And this tells me two things. One, God has mercy on the children. And two, the children were smart enough to actually separate from their parents when they realized that their parents were not going the right way. And so in some of these cases, you had, like I said, you had parents who intentionally made a decision to invest in their children and set them up for success. In some cases, you had children who actually made the decision to set themselves up for success in spite of their parents. And in both cases, God says there is a place for you. There is mercy for you. And you guys are going to go in and you're going to be able to enjoy what your parents did not. So Numbers 27, then came the daughters of Zelophehad, and they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the princes of all the congregation by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, Our father died in the wilderness and had no sons. Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family? Because he has no son. Give unto us, therefore, a possession among the brethren of our father. And Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord spake, The daughters of Zelophehad speak right. You shall surely give them a possession of an inheritance among their father's brethren, and you shall cause the inheritance of their father to pass unto them. Okay, so this is a unique case, and it makes me wonder if they were just representative, if they were just the first ones who brought it up. I couldn't imagine, with all of the thousands of people and families, that this was the only family where, like, the father was dead and it was all daughters. But they brought a unique case, and they said, hey, when we're going in and everyone's claiming their inheritance, we're not associated with any men of prominence, and so our father, if he were alive, he would be inheriting. And if we had brothers, they would be inheriting. But as it stands, we're not going to inherit anything, and we're going to be left to our own devices. Is it not right to give us some land? So Moses goes to God. God says, yes, they speak right, quite right, right? If you were British. And so this is the unique case of the daughters of Zelophehad, and it kind of keeps on coming up, in the book of Numbers, and then it comes back up in the book of Joshua. And you might be thinking, why would they take up so much time to include this in the Torah? And yes, there was kind of a statute and a command and an exception, that God gives to Moses, that he comes out and he says, this is how we're going to deal with this kind of stuff. But it goes much greater than that. Now, I keep saying as we do our study through Scripture, when something seems out of place or you wonder why it's there or it seems confusing, then put Jesus right in the center of it and it'll make perfect sense. So what do you think that means in this case? Well, you may remember, and in the book of Jeremiah, that God had promised all along that this is going to be the godly line, this is going to be the messianic line, in which I'm going to bring the Messiah. And so one of those stop points was David and the royal line of David. And he says, I will not fail to put a successor upon your throne until the Messiah comes. Okay, and so the royal line of David, and you follow Matthew's genealogy, you go through David. And actually, if you go through Matthew and Luke's genealogy, you go through Abraham, you go through David. And yet, when you get to David, then Luke makes a detour, and he goes through one of David's other sons other than Solomon. And then you may notice that it looks like it kind of interweaves at one point, and then it comes back, and it ends at two different points. Matthew ends up at Joseph, and Luke ends up at Mary. And both of them technically have all of the right ingredients for a pedigree. But in the book of Jeremiah, there was a king that was so bad that in Jeremiah 22:30, God says, write this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. And you could imagine as soon as God said that there was a party going on in Satan's headquarters in which he thinks he's finally done it. He's finally contradicted himself. He's finally shot down his own plan. And so now we won. Messiah can't come because David's royal line has been cursed. And he says there's no children that are going to come from that line or sit on that throne anymore. And Messiah had to come through that line, so no Messiah can come on the scene anymore. And I believe that it was C.I. Scofield who first pointed out that the entirety of the claims of Christ hinge on this passage, this exception that was made by Moses in the Torah for the daughters of Zelophehad. And here's what I mean by that. Heli, who was Mary's father, apparently had no sons. And Mary married within the tribe of Judah, which is what God says that these daughters who claim an inheritance, that they have to marry within their own tribe. And that way the inheritance they don't get more inheritance when they marry, that they marry within the tribe. And so they just, continue on like that. So Mary married within the tribe of Judah. She married Joseph. Okay. And Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary, of the household and lineage of David, and carrying the legal title to the line, but without the blood curse of Jeconiah. because there was an exception where Heli would have been able to formally adopt Mary as and Jesus into his line. And so it went around the blood curse of Jeconiah and through the virgin birth of, of Jesus. And so Jesus miraculously comes through the messianic line through a virgin birth and avoids the blood curse that was placed on Jeconiah. And it all hinges on this family, these daughters that come and ask Moses for this exception when they come into the land and inherit. And so that is incredible. That's one of those things that didn't happen by accident. That is one of those things that just shows that Jesus is indeed the Messiah. Numbers 27:12, and the Lord said unto Moses, Get up into this mount Abiram, and see the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. And when you have seen it, you shall also be gathered unto your people, as Aaron your brother was gathered. And so we have Moses, and God calls him, and he says, Aaron's gone, and he's passed away, and now, just like I told you, you're not going to go into the promised land, but I'm going to let you see it. I'm going to let you see it, but I'm not going to let you possess it. And Moses was given this privilege. The 12 spies, so the 10 besides Joshua and Caleb, they got that privilege to actually go into the promised land and to experience it. And, those people who tried to go into the promised land and fight the army and got routed after God gave the consequences, well, they got to see it. But Moses gets this unique opportunity. You get to see the fruits of your work as a leader, okay? You brought these people here, and you led them, and now you're at the border, and they're going to go in, and you're not going to go in. But I brought you to this land. You're going to be able to see it, but you're not going to be able to possess it. And some of us feel like this. And this goes back to that decision that the parents had to make, okay? Because both I and my wife personally did not come from very close families, okay? There was a lot of things that we both kind of grew up knowing that's not right, that's not okay, that's unhealthy, and we both had it placed within us that when we grew up, we wanted to do different. We wanted better. We wanted more than what our parents gave us. But even more than that, our desire was that we were going to be able to pass on to our children a better future so that they can go even further than what we wanted. And so, but there's times, and perhaps you can relate with this, there's times in which the vision of what we saw is greater than what we're actually physically able to manage. There's patterns, the sins of the parents that come upon the children. That's a real thing, that you find yourself often just doing things that are just ingrained in you and they're unconscious to you, and you just repeat. As much as you find it almost detestable, you find yourself repeating the exact same thing that you saw your parents do, and you even swore that you would never do. And there's ways in which you interact with your spouse, ways in which you interact with your children, in which or maybe it's in other areas of your life, and you find yourself almost just, mad at yourself that you're doing it. And there's a limitation sometimes to how far God he's still changing you, he's still growing you, and he's still working in your life, and he's still using you. But there's sometimes a cap in which you find yourself not being able to break beyond, but yet you still have this hope that you're going to be able to instill in your kids the ability to go past that, the ability to want more than that, and to go further than that. And by the grace of God, we hope that we can experience some of those things that we feel like we'll never be able to accomplish. We're going to be able to experience those things through our children, through our grandchildren, and who knows, even through our great grandchildren, if the Lord, if the Lord tarries and allows us to live that long. And so sometimes, we get this glimpse like Moses did. I get to see it. I have a vision of it, but I don't get to necessarily possess it. Numbers 27:15, and Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, Let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which may go out before them, and which may go in before them, which may lead them out, and which may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. And the Lord said unto Moses, Take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. And you shall put some of your honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, and shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of Urim before the Lord. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. And so Moses, when God calls him up to the mountain and like, hey, it's your turn, you're going to see the land, you're going to die, you're going to go. Moses says, well, remember how you had Aaron put his garments on Eleazar and he took over his place as high priest, and the leadership transfer was clear. What are we going to do about that? Because the people need a shepherd. They need somebody who's going to lead over them and lead them well. And so I'd like to, what's the plan for that? And so God says to him, I want you to get Joshua. So Joshua, one of the two spies. So he's one of the older guys at this point. He's one of the two guys in all of Israel that were counted in this second census over the age of 60. Okay, and I don't know how old he was when they took the first census, but he's one of those who is over the age of 60. And so he has the experience, he has the wisdom, he was there from the beginning. He was there when they came out of Egypt, and he's there now. He's been under the tutelage of Moses. He's showed himself faithful, and he's the one that God says, he's the guy. He's the one I'm going to use to successfully take this next generation into the promised land. And so but Moses' response, there's so many moments where I've seen where Moses he responds so well, and his concern is genuinely for the people. And in this case, he's like, these people, there's so many of them. They need a leader. They need somebody to guide them. They need somebody who can be like me, who can speak with you and can hear what your plan and your vision is for them and communicate that to them. Somebody who was willing to stand in the gap for them when they complain and when they're bitter, and somebody who can say to Eleazar the high priest, hey, you better get in there and make atonement for them so that they don't all die. The people need a shepherd. And in this moment, I see the parallel between Moses and between Jesus. How Jesus, he looks upon the people as he's gathering his disciples, and he says, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into the harvest. And it says that he went out and he looked upon the people and he saw them as sheep without a shepherd. And it makes me wonder if Moses, when he went up and he looked out in the promised land, if he also looked out over the other side and he saw the entire camp of Israel. All these people that he's been leading for all these years, and this new generation that's been risen up and the former generations passed away. And he's about to join them, and he looks out upon them and he thinks that same thing. Man, I don't want them to be lost. I don't want them to be, because let's be honest, sheep without a shepherd are pretty much dead. They are prey. They are going to die. Sheep without a shepherd die, period. It's just a matter of how they're going to die, how long it is before they're going to die. But sheep without a shepherd, they're going to wander off, they're going to be in danger, and they're going to be helpless, and they're going to die. So Moses wants to make sure that they have a shepherd. So Numbers 32 through 16 is a very interesting passage, and so I just kind of summarized it here for you. If a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. So far, so good. If you're a guy and you make a promise to God, you better keep it. You're going to be held accountable to keep it. But goes on, if a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord and bind herself by a bond, then there's some caveats here. If she has a father or a husband who hears her vow and they hold their peace, then all her vows shall stand. But if her father or husband disallows her in the day that he hears, not any of her vows shall stand, and the Lord shall forgive her because her father or husband disavowed her. But if a woman doesn't have a husband or a father, like in the case of a widow, that after she's divorced, wherewith they have bound their souls, they shall stand against her. So a widow, or a woman who doesn't have a father or a husband, anything she says and vows to God, she's held accountable for. But if the father or husband shall in any way make them void after he has heard them, then he shall bear her iniquity. So a husband or a father, if they initially let her make the vow, but then they come back later and say, I realize that was wrong, and they stand in the gap for their wife or for their daughter, then the woman is released from the vow, but the husband bears the iniquity of the wife or the daughter. Okay? And so this is one of those places where you say, okay, well, we're not Israelites and we're not under the old covenant, and so what does this have to do with us? And it's not saying that God deals the same way when it comes to oaths and vows and all of these types of things as he does now. But it does show us that all throughout the pages of the Bible, and this is something that our culture just absolutely abhors, is this statement of order in which God says to the men, God holds the men to a higher accountability than the women because he has called the men to lead the women in their life. And I'm not saying that men in general are called to lead women in general. I'm saying, like it says here, that a father is called to lead his daughter, and a husband is called to lead his wife. And this is something that our culture abhors, in which, like I said, we say if everything is equal, then we all have the same role, we all have the same function. And we talked about how the last week or the week before, how equality does not equal in God's eyes role or function, that he can have role and function be separate. He can design us to be different and to complement each other, and yet still have an established order of things. That just like the people of Israel need a leader over them, that he has established a leader within the home, and that is the husband or the father. Okay? And this is a call for men to step up. And it doesn't mean that, like if your wife says something that you can say, oh, she didn't mean to say that, God, and, stand in the gap for her that way. But it does call you as the leader of your home. Are you praying for your wife? Are you praying for your children? Are you leading them? And this is just as much a word to me as it is to any other man who is listening to this, our tendency as men is either to say, I'm going to be passive and I'm going to let her lead if she takes that, or there's just going to be no leader in the home. Or our tendency is to say, leadership to me is X, Y, or Z. And so a lot of men, we take the role of providing for our families very seriously, and we work really hard and we try everything we can to provide for our families well. But then our wives are at home, our children are at home, and they're saying, but we need somebody to lead us here. Oftentimes, as men, we're great leaders out in the workplace and out in our careers and out in the things that God has for us. But then we ignore the mission field that's at our own home. And oftentimes when we go home, we see that as a place of comfort and rest and refreshment. And oftentimes that's the primary mission field that He's called us to reach. That's the primary role of leadership that He's called us to lead. And that's why in the church, when He says, I'm looking for leaders in the church, He says, if you can't lead your own family well, you shouldn't be leading the church. And sometimes that's awfully convicting to me as a pastor. But this is a call for men to step up. And that's why earlier this week I issued a challenge to the men in the church. And I said, here's my challenge. Bring your wives and your children to church on Sunday. Don't wait for them to say that, hey, we should go to church. You, as the husband, as the leader of your home, the spiritual leader of your home, should get up, should get the stuff ready Saturday night, and you should get your children up. You should get your family up, and you should get them in the mindset, we are going to church. Not because we have to, because we want to. We want to make that always clear. But we are going to go to church. We are going to be generous, and we're going to give as a family. We are going to grow we're going to grow together in our faith. We're going to, working together with the wife so that you can raise the children in the way that they should go. Working with the wife so that you can have your finances go in the way they should go. Working together, but taking the lead. And taking the lead and responsibility for yourself, for your relationship, for your children. It's time for the men to step up again. It's time for men to be men, women to be women, and everyone to function in the way that God has designed them and intended, so that we come together. Just like I said, a place for everybody. We all come together. We all serve each other with our unique talents and responsibilities and personality and experience and ways of processing and thinking, our different intelligences, our different gifts, all of it, we're bringing it to the table as a family to serve one another. We bring it to the table as a church to serve one another, and as a community, that if we bring it together and serve one another, the needs will be met. And so, how is God calling you to grow? Is He calling you to grow in your parenting, in your marriage, being a good leader? How about being a good follower? Considering others, showing mercy, contentment with what God has for you, manhood and womanhood. And I would love to hear how God is moving in your life in those different ways. And so I call you again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Click that like button, that comment down below. Go in the description. Start doing the daily assignments that we have there for you, and share your insights from it and ask your questions from it. And if there's others in your life who want to study the Bible, but they don't have the tools to do that, then invite them, share this with them. And so that we can come together, we can encourage each other, we can sharpen one another. And until next time, may God's grace be with you.